The river runs black under a moonless sky. A lone figure kneels by the water's edge, his weathered hands cupping the cold stream. Jacob Peniel, deceiver, supplanter. A man who has spent his entire life running from the consequences of his choices. Tonight, there is nowhere left to run. The silence breaks with the sound of footsteps. Heavy, deliberate, Jacob turns, his heart hammering against his ribs. A shadow emerges from the darkness, tall, imposing features obscured by the night. Neither speaks. They simply know. What follows is not a fight. It is something far more profound. It is a reckoning 20 years in the making. They grapple in the dust beside the Jabbok River, hour after hour, neither gaining ground, neither yielding. Jacob's muscles scream, his lungs burn, still he holds on. This stranger, this divine visitor, has something Jacob needs, something he has sought his entire life, a blessing that cannot be stolen, only earned. As dawn breaks across the eastern hills, the stranger strikes Jacob's hip with a touch that sends lightning through his bones. The joint dislocates with a sound like braying timber. Jacob collapses, but does not release his grip. "Let me go," the stranger commands. "The day is breaking." Jacob's voice is barely a whisper, raw from exertion and pain. "I will not let you go unless you bless me." "What is your name?" The question hangs in the air like morning mist. For 37 years, Jacob has carried that name like a curse. Jacob, the grasper, the one who takes what belongs to others. But in this moment, beside this river, with his body broken and his pride shattered, he speaks it with something approaching honesty. "Jacob," the stranger's eyes seem to hold the depth of eternity. "No longer will your name be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with humans and have overcome. Israel, the one who wrestles with God, the limping prince who would father a nation. But how did it come to this? How does a shepherd's son become the patriarch of 12 tribes? To understand Jacob's destiny, we must return to the beginning, to a time when empires rose and fell like grass, when the creator of the universe made promises that would echo through eternity. Our story begins not with Jacob, but with his father Isaac, son of Abraham, heir, to promises that seemed impossible to fulfill. The tent is quiet, except for the sound of Isaac's labored prayers. Beside him, Rebekah weeps silently into her hands. 20 years of marriage, 20 years of hoping, 20 years of empty arms and whispered questions to a God who seemed to have forgotten his promises. Isaac lifts his face toward heaven, his voice cracking with emotion. "Lord God of my father, Abraham, you promised that through my offspring all nations would be blessed. How can this be if I have no children?" The prayer hangs in the desert air, mingling with the smoke from evening sacrifices and the distant bleating of sheep. For months, Isaac and Rebekah have sought the Lord's face, fasting and praying, offering sacrifices and pleading for the gift of life. Then it happens, not with fanfare or angelic visitation, but quietly, tenderly. Rebekah's monthly cycle stops. Her body begins to change. Life, 2 lives take root in her womb, but these are no ordinary children. From the earliest months, Rebekah feels them fighting within her, their struggles so violent she fears for her life. In desperation, she seeks the Lord in prayer. If this is how it's going to be, Why do I even live? The answer comes not as a gentle whisper, but as a prophetic thunderclap that will reshape the destiny of nations. 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 peoples from within you will be separated. 1 people will be stronger than the other, and the older will serve the younger. The older will serve the younger. These words violate every convention of ancient society, every expectation of patriarchal blessing. The firstborn inherits. The firstborn leads. The firstborn receives the double portion and the Father's blessing. But God's ways are not man's ways. The birth is difficult. Rebekah's cries echo through the camp as the midwives work frantically. The first child emerges covered in reddish hair so much that he looks like a garment of fur. They name him Esau, the hairy one. But even as Esau enters the world, a tiny hand grips his heel, holding him back. The second twin emerges with this grip intact, as if even in birth he seeks to overtake his brother. Isaac looks at this second son and speaks the name that will define him, Jacob, the heel grasper, the supplanter. From the moment they draw breath, the brothers are different. Esau grows into everything a Hebrew father could want in a firstborn son. Strong-skilled with bow and spear, a hunter who brings home fresh meat and makes his father's heart swell with pride. He is impulsive, generous to a fault, a man who lives entirely in the present moment. Jacob is his opposite, quiet where Esau is boisterous, thoughtful where his brother is reactive. He prefers the security of tents to the uncertainty of the hunt. He tends sheep and goats, negotiates with merchants, and dreams of futures that stretch beyond the next meal or the next adventure. Isaac loves Esau because he brings him fresh game. Rebekah loves Jacob because he stays close to home, listening to her stories of angels and promises of a God who chooses the unlikely to accomplish the impossible. The division in their household runs deeper than parental preference. It cuts to the very heart of what it means to inherit the promises of Abraham. Will God's chosen line run through Esau, the firstborn, the natural heir, or through Jacob, the younger son whose very name speaks of grasping and taking what belongs to another? The answer comes on an ordinary day that will prove to be anything but ordinary. The sun beats down mercilessly on the camp. It is the kind of heat that sucks moisture from everything it touches, that sends even the hardiest desert dwellers seeking shade. Esau has been hunting since before dawn, tracking wild goats through rocky terrain that would challenge a mountain sheep. He returns empty-handed, his tongue thick with thirst, his stomach cramping from hunger. The hunt that was to provide meat for several days has yielded nothing but exhaustion and frustration. But something smells incredible. Following his nose, Esau finds Jacob tending a cooking fire, stirring a pot of lentil stew that sends aromatic steam into the still air. The smell of cumin and coriander, of slow-cooked legumes and herbs, fills Esau's nostrils and makes his mouth water. "Give me some of that red stew," Esau demands, pointing at the pot with a trembling hand. "I'm about to die." Jacob looks up from his cooking, his dark eyes calculating. He has waited his entire life for this moment, though he might not have recognized it until now. Here is his brother, the firstborn, the heir to everything that should be Jacob's by divine decree, and he is desperate. "First, sell me your birthright," Jacob says quietly. The words hang between them like a blade. The birthright. the legal right of the firstborn to receive a double portion of the inheritance and to serve as the family's spiritual leader after the father's death. In any other family, it might be a matter of property and position. But this is Isaac's family. This is the birthright that carries with it the covenant promises of Abraham, land, descendants, and blessing for all nations. Esau laughs, but there is no humor in it. Look, I'm about to die. What good is a birthright to me? It is the response of a man who lives entirely in the present, who cannot see beyond the immediate need. Hungry now, he cannot imagine being satisfied later. Weak now, he cannot envision future strength. The birthright is abstract theoretical. The stew is real. Swear to me first, Jacob insists. He will not be cheated out of this moment by his brother's impulsiveness. Esau raises his right hand without hesitation. I swear it. The oath is binding. In a culture where a man's word is his bond, where oaths invoke the very name of God as witness, Esau has just traded his inheritance for a bowl of lentils. Jacob ladles the stew into a bowl and tears off a piece of fresh bread. Esau falls on the food like a starving animal, slurping and tearing, completely absorbed in the act of consumption. When he is finished, he wipes his mouth with the back of his hand, belches contentedly, and walks away, as if nothing significant has happened. But everything has changed. The natural order has been overturned. The younger has become the elder, not through violence or deception, but through a transaction freely entered into by both parties. God's prophecy is beginning to unfold one bowl of stew at a time. Years, Ostesa grows old and his eyes grow dim. The strong hands that once drew the bow and led flocks across vast distances now tremble with age. The keen eyes that could spot a hawk circling miles away now struggle to distinguish faces in bright sunlight. The time has come for the patriarchal blessing. In the ancient Near East, a father's deathbed blessing is more than mere words. It is a prophetic pronouncement that shapes destiny, that calls down divine favor on the recipient and his descendants. Isaac has given many blessings over the years, to servants, to neighbors, to visitors. But the blessing he will give to his firstborn son will echo through history. Isaac calls Esau to his tent. My son, I am old and don't know the day of my death. Please take your equipment, your quiver and your bow, and go out to the field and hunt game for me. Then make me the kind of delicious food I love and bring it to me to eat, so that I may bless you before I die. The request is simple enough. One last meal of fresh venison, prepared the way Isaac loves it, to mark the passing of authority from father to son. But Rebekah is listening from outside the tent, and her heart races as she hears the words, "This cannot happen. Not like this. Not when God himself has declared that the older will serve the younger. Not when Jacob is the true heir to the covenant promises." As soon as Esau leaves for the hunt, Rebekah hurries to find Jacob. Her words tumble over each other in her urgency. "Look, I heard your father speaking to your brother Esau. He said, 'Bring me game and make me delicious food to eat, so that I may bless you in the Lord's presence before I die.' Now then, my son, listen to my voice and do what I tell you. Go to the flock and bring me 2 choice young goats, and I will make them into delicious food for your father, the kind he loves. Then take it to your father so that he may eat it and bless you before he dies." Jacob's first instinct is caution. This is deception on a scale he has never contemplated. Yes, he manipulated Esau into selling his birthright, but that was a fair transaction between brothers. This is fraud against his own father. But a brother Esau is a hairy man, and I have smooth skin. Suppose my father touches me, then I will be revealed to him as a deceiver, and I will bring a curse rather than a blessing on myself." Rebekah's response reveals the depth of her determination. "Your curse be on me, my son. Just obey my voice and go get them for me." The plan that unfolds is elaborate and desperate. Rebekah prepares the goat meat with all the skill of decades, seasoning it to taste like wild game. She dresses Jacob in Esau's clothes, the ones that carry the scent of the field and the hunt. Most crucially, she covers Jacob's hands and the smooth part of his neck with goatskins, creating the illusion of Esau's natural hairiness. Jacob approaches his father's tent with trembling hands and a voice he struggles to keep steady. Each step feels like walking toward judgment. "Father, yes, my son, who are you? Esau or Jacob?" The question pierces Jacob's heart like an arrow. Who is he? In this moment, dressed as his brother, carrying food prepared by deception, he hardly knows himself. "I am Esau, your firstborn. I have done as you told me. Please sit up and eat some of my game so that you may bless me." Isaac is puzzled. "How did you hunt it so quickly?" "My son." Jacob's lie builds upon itself. "Because the Lord your God made it happen for me." The invocation of God's name in service of deception adds weight to the sin, but Jacob presses forward. He has come too far to turn back now. Isaac remains suspicious. "Please come closer so I can touch you, So are you really my son Esau or not?" This is the moment of greatest danger. Jacob approaches his father's bed, his heart hammering so loudly he is certain Isaac must hear it. The old man's hands explore Jacob's arms and neck, feeling the coarse goat hair, smelling the outdoor scents that cling to Esau's garments. The voice is Jacob's voice, but the hands are Esau's hands. For a terrible moment, Jacob thinks he has been discovered. But Isaac's failing senses cannot reconcile the contradictions. The evidence of touch and smell overrides the evidence of hearing. "Are you really my son Esau?" "I am." The lie is complete. Isaac eats the food Jacob has brought, drinks the wine that accompanies it. When the meal is finished, he calls his son close. "Please come here and kiss me, my son." Jacob leans in for what he believes will be his father's final test. Isaac inhales deeply, taking in the scent of field and sky that clings to Esau's clothes. Satisfied at last, he places his hands on Jacob's head and speaks the words that will shape the future of nations. "Ah, the smell of my son is like the smell of a field that the Lord has blessed. May God give to you, from the dew of the sky and from the richness of the land, an abundance of grain and new wine. May peoples serve you and nations bow down to you. Be master over your relatives. May your mother's sons bow down to you. Those who curse you will be cursed, and those who bless you will be blessed." The blessing is magnificent in scope, encompassing agricultural prosperity, political dominance, and spiritual authority. It is everything Abraham's descendants were promised, concentrated into the life of one man and his offspring. But as the last words leave Isaac's lips, footsteps approach the tent. Heavy, confident steps that Jacob recognizes with growing horror. Esau has returned from his hunt. Jacob barely escapes before his brother enters the tent, carrying a dish of perfectly prepared venison and wearing the expectant smile of a favored son. Let my father get up and eat some of his son's game, so that you may bless me. Isaac's confusion is immediate and terrible. Who are you? I am Esau, your firstborn son. The words hit Isaac like physical blows. He begins to tremble violently at the full scope of the deception crashing over him like a flood. Who was it then who hunted game and brought it to me? I ate it all before you came in, and I blessed him. Indeed, he will be blessed. Esau's cry of anguish pierces the desert silence. It is the sound of a man whose entire future has been stolen in a single moment of deception. Bless me too, my father. But Isaac's response carries the weight of divine inevitability. Your brother came deceitfully and took your blessing. He was rightly named Jacob because he has cheated me twice now. He took my birthright, and look, now he has taken my blessing. Haven't you saved a blessing for me? Isaac explains that the blessing he gave was comprehensive, leaving little room for what remains. But moved by his son's tears, he places his hands on Esau's head and speaks, Look, your dwelling place will be away from the richness of the land, away from the dew of the sky above. You will live by your sword, and you will serve your brother. But when you rebel, you will break his yoke from your neck. It is a blessing, but a harsh one. Esau will be a warrior, but also a wanderer. He will serve his brother, but not forever. The prophecy given before their birth is confirmed: the older will serve the younger. But Esau's response is not acceptance. It is rage that burns like a furnace. The days of mourning for my father are approaching. Then I will kill my brother Jacob. The threat is not idle. Esau is a skilled warrior, a man of violence when provoked. He has lost everything that defined his identity as the firstborn, and his only consolation is the promise of revenge. Rebekah hears of the threat and acts quickly. She calls Jacob to her and speaks words that will send him into exile for 20 years. Look, your brother Esau is consoling himself concerning you by planning to kill you. So now, my son, listen to my voice. Get up and flee to my brother Laban in Haran. Stay with him for a few days until your brother's anger subsides, until your brother's rage turns away from you and he forgets what you have done to him. Then I will send for you and bring you back from there. Why should I lose both of you in one day? But Rebekah cannot simply send Jacob away without reason. Isaac must believe the journey has a higher purpose. So she approaches her husband with a different concern entirely. I am sick of my life because of these Hittite women. If Jacob marries a Hittite woman like these from the women of the land, what good is my life to me? It is a clever strategy. Isaac, like his father Abraham, wants his son to marry within the family line, not among the pagan peoples of Canaan. The suggestion that Jacob should travel to Haran to find a wife among Laban's daughters makes perfect sense. Isaac calls Jacob to him and for the first time since the deception, father and son speak face to face. But Isaac does not rebuke his younger son. Instead, he confirms the blessing, even expanding upon it. May God Almighty bless you and make you fruitful and multiply you so that you become an assembly of peoples. May God give you and your offspring the blessing of Abraham, so that you may possess the land where you live as a foreigner, the land God gave to Abraham, the blessing of Abraham, the promise of land and descendants and divine favor. Despite the deception, despite the broken trust between father and son, Isaac acknowledges that Jacob is indeed the heir to the covenant, and so Jacob sets out on the long road to Haran, leaving behind everything familiar and walking into an uncertain future. He carries with him the stolen blessing, the anger of his brother, and the weight of promises too large for any one man to bear. Behind him, the tents of Isaac grow small and finally disappear beyond the horizon. Ahead lies a journey of nearly 500 miles through desert and mountain, past hostile tribes and dangerous terrain. He is alone as he has never been alone before, but he is not abandoned. The sun sets on Jacob's first day of exile, painting the western sky in shades of gold and crimson. He has walked nearly 20 miles since leaving his father's tents, following ancient caravan routes that wind northward through the hill country. His feet ache in his sandals. His shoulders burn from the pack that carries his few possessions, some food, a water skin, a warm cloak for the cold desert nights, and the staff that marks him as a traveler. But worse than the physical discomfort is the emotional weight he carries. He is the son of Isaac, grandson of Abraham, heir to promises that span generations. Yet he walks alone on a dusty road, an exile driven from his home by his own deception and his brother's rage. As darkness falls, Jacob searches for a place to rest. The terrain here is rocky and barren, offering little comfort to a weary traveler. Finally, he finds a relatively flat spot sheltered by a low ridge. There are no tents here, no welcoming fires, no servants to prepare his meal. Just the vast silence of the wilderness and the cold light of distant stars. Jacob gathers a few smooth stones and arranges them as a pillow. It is a poor substitute for the soft cushions of his father's tent, but it will have to suffice. He eats a small portion of bread and dried meat drinks sparingly from his water skin and wraps himself in his cloak against the desert chill. As he lies on the hard ground, staring up at the star-filled sky, Jacob's thoughts turned inward. Is this what it means to be chosen to carry God's promises while walking alone through the darkness? To inherit blessings through deception and live with the consequences. Sleep comes fitfully filled with dreams of home and the brother who wants him dead. But then the dream changes, becomes something else entirely. Jacob sees a stairway, a massive stone structure that seems to rise from the very earth beneath him. Its base rests on the rocky ground where he sleeps, but its top disappears into the heavens, reaching heights beyond human comprehension. And on this stairway, moving up and down in constant motion, are the angels of God. Beings of light and power, messengers of the Most High, ascending to heaven with reports from earth and descending with divine commands for the world below. The sight is both terrifying and wonderful. Jacob realizes he is witnessing something that no human eyes were meant to see, the connection between heaven and earth, the invisible ladder on which the business of the universe is conducted. But the dream is not finished. At the top of the stairway, surrounded by glory that makes the sun seem dim, stands the Lord himself. And he speaks, "I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham and the God of Isaac. I will give you and your offspring the land on which you are lying. Your offspring will be like the dust of the earth, and you will spread out to the west, the east, the north, and the south. All the families of the earth will be blessed through you and your offspring. Look, I am with you and will watch over you wherever you go, and I will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you." The words wash over Jacob like water in a parched desert. Every promise made to Abraham and Isaac is confirmed and expanded. The land, this very ground on which he sleeps as an exile, will belong to his descendants. His offspring will multiply like dust spread into every corner of the earth. Through his family line, all nations will receive blessing. But perhaps most precious of all is the personal promise, "I am with you and will watch over you wherever you go." Jacob is not alone, has never been alone. The God who spoke the universe into existence, who called Abraham from Ur and promised Isaac to barren Sarah, walks with Jacob on this dusty road to Haran. Jacob wakes with the first light of dawn, but the dream clings to him like morning mist. He sits up slowly looking around at the ordinary landscape that seemed so extraordinary in the night. The rocks are just rocks. The ridge is just stone and scrub brush, but everything is changed. "Surely the Lord is in this place," Jacob whispers, "and I didn't know it." Fear and wonder battle in his heart. How awesome is this place? This is none other than the house of God. This is the gate of heaven. Early in the morning, Jacob takes the stone he had used as a pillow and sets it up as a pillar. From a small flask of olive oil, precious and carefully guarded, he pours a libation over the stone, consecrating it as a monument to this moment. He names the place Bethel, the house of God. But Jacob's response to the divine encounter goes beyond simple wonder. Standing before the stone pillar in the morning light, he makes a vow that will define the rest of his life. "If God will be with me and watch over me on this journey I'm taking, and if he provides me with food to eat and clothing to wear, and if I return safely to my father's house, then the Lord will be my God. This stone that I have set up as a pillar will be God's house, and I will give you 1/10 of everything you give me." It is a conditional vow, the promise of a man still learning to trust. Jacob has heard God's unconditional promise, but his response is hedged with if statements. If God protects him, if God provides for him, if God brings him home safely, then Jacob will serve him. It is not the response of perfect faith, but it is honest. Jacob is a man who thinks in terms of transactions and negotiations. Even with God, he seeks to establish terms and conditions, but God's promises do not depend on Jacob's perfect faith. They rest on divine faithfulness alone. With the oil still glistening on the stone pillar, Jacob shoulders his pack and continues northward. The road to Haran stretches before him long and uncertain, but he no longer walks it alone. The God of his fathers has claimed him as his own, and that changes everything. The stone at Bethel will wait for his return, a monument to the night when heaven touched earth and a frightened exile discovered that he was heir to promises larger than his imagination. But first, there are 20 years in Haran, 20 years of love and labor, deception and blessing, sorrow and joy, 20 years in which Jacob the supplanter will learn what it truly means to be grasped by the God who chooses the unlikely to accomplish the impossible. The journey to Haran takes Jacob through terrain that shifts from the familiar hills of Canaan to the broader plains of Mesopotamia. Each step carries him further from home and deeper into uncertainty. But it also carries him closer to a destiny he cannot yet imagine. After nearly a month of travel, following well-worn caravan routes, and depending on the hospitality of strangers, Jacob crests a low hill and sees before him the outskirts of Haran. It is a prosperous town, fed by the trade routes that crisscross this region, and watered by streams that make agriculture possible even in the dry season. But Jacob is not interested in the town itself. His destination lies beyond Haran proper, in the grazing lands where his mother's brother Laban keeps his flocks. As Jacob approaches the area, he sees what he is looking for, a well with a large stone covering its mouth. Around the well, 3 flocks of sheep rest in the shade, their shepherds lounging nearby, in the typical Middle Eastern pattern of waiting for the heat to subside. Wells are social centers in nomadic culture, places where news is exchanged and relationships are formed. Jacob approaches the shepherds with the standard greeting of a traveler seeking information. "My brothers, where are you from?" "We're from Haran." "Do you know Laban, Nahor's grandson?" "Yes, we know him." "Is he well?" "Yes, he's well. In fact, here comes his daughter, Rachel, with his sheep." Jacob looks in the direction they indicate and sees a young woman approaching with a flock. Even from a distance, there is something about her that captures his attention. The confident way she walks, the easy manner with which she manages the sheep, the grace of her movements in the shimmering heat. But as she draws closer, Jacob's admiration deepens into something much more profound. Rachel is beautiful, but it is not merely her physical appearance that affects him so powerfully. There is something in her eyes, intelligence, strength, a vitality that speaks to his own restless spirit. The shepherds explain their routine. "We can't water the sheep until all the flocks are gathered and the stone is rolled away from the well's mouth." It is a sensible system. The stone is too heavy for one man to move alone, so they wait until all the shepherds are present to share the work. But Jacob is not thinking about sensible systems. He is watching Rachel approach, and something inside him has shifted fundamentally. When Rachel reaches the well with her flock, Jacob steps forward, with strength born of emotion rather than mere physical power. He single-handedly rolls the large stone away from the mouth of the well. The shepherds watch in amazement as this stranger accomplishes alone what normally requires their combined effort. Jacob draws water for Rachel's flock, his eyes never leaving her face. When the sheep have drunk their fill, he approaches her directly. "I am Jacob, your father's relative, the son of Rebekah." The words are simple, but they carry the weight of family connection, of shared history, of belonging. Rachel's eyes widen as she realizes who this stranger is. The son of her father's sister, the nephew who was supposed to come seeking a wife. And then Jacob does something that surprises them both. Overwhelmed by emotion, relief at finding his family joy at Rachel's beauty, gratitude for God's guidance, he begins to weep. These are not tears of sorrow, but of deep feeling that cannot be contained. Rachel runs to tell her father. Within minutes, Laban himself appears, having heard the news that his nephew has arrived. The older man embraces Jacob warmly, welcoming him as family, and insisting that he come to the house immediately. "You are indeed my bone and my flesh," Laban declares, using the ancient formula that establishes kinship bonds. Jacob stays with Laban for a month, working alongside the hired men and learning the rhythms of life in this new place. But his heart is entirely captured by Rachel. Every day spent in her presence deepens his love. Every conversation reveals new depths to her character. Every shared glance confirms what he knew from that first moment at the well. She is the woman he wants to spend his life with. At the end of the month, Laban approaches Jacob with a proposal. "Because you are my relative, should you work for me for nothing? Tell me what your wages should be." It is the opening Jacob has been waiting for. His answer comes without hesitation. "I'll work for you 7 years for your younger daughter Rachel." 7 years. It is an enormous bride price, far beyond what would normally be expected. But Jacob's love for Rachel makes the cost seem insignificant. Laban considers the offer with the calculating mind of a skilled negotiator. 7 years of free labor from a skilled shepherd is worth far more than any bride price he could expect from another suitor. And there is the added advantage of keeping the marriage within the family line. "It's better that I give her to you than to another man. Stay with me." The agreement is made. Jacob will work 7 years for the right to marry Rachel. It seems like an eternity, but love makes the time pass differently. The 7 years seemed to Jacob like only a few days because of his love for Rachel. Each morning brings the joy of seeing her face. Each evening offers the possibility of stolen conversations and shared dreams. The work is hard, tending sheep in all weather, protecting them from predators, leading them to pasture and water. But it is transformed by the knowledge that every day brings him closer to his goal. Jacob proves himself an exceptional shepherd. Under his care, Laban's flocks multiply and thrive, sick animals recover. The sheep produce healthy lambs year after year. Even the difficult seasons, drought, harsh winters, predator attacks, cannot diminish the prosperity Jacob brings to his uncle's household. But more than his skill with animals, Jacob demonstrates the same calculating intelligence that served him in his father's house. He learns the intricate politics of tribal relationships, the patterns of weather and seasons, the art of negotiation that governs trade in this region. Laban begins to depend on him not just as a shepherd, but as a trusted advisor. The 7 years draw to a close. Jacob approaches his uncle with the confidence of a man who has more than fulfilled his part of the bargain. "My time is completed. Give me my wife so I can sleep with her." Laban agrees readily and begins planning the wedding feast. It will be a celebration worthy of his daughter and his nephew with food and wine and music that will last for days. Invitations go out to relatives and neighbors. Animals are slaughtered for the feast. The finest wine is brought up from storage. The wedding day arrives with all the pageantry Laban has promised. The feast is magnificent, with course after course of rich food and cup after cup of strong wine. Jacob, exhausted by 7 years of labor and overcome with joy at finally reaching his goal, drinks more than he usually would. The wine flows freely, and the celebration continues deep into the night. In ancient Hebrew culture, the bride is heavily veiled throughout the wedding ceremony and feast. Jacob catches glimpses of his beloved through the veil. A hand here, a gesture there, but they do not speak directly. The veil preserves the bride's modesty and builds anticipation for the moment when husband and wife will finally be alone together. As the night deepens and the guests begin to drift away, Laban leads the veiled bride to the wedding chamber where Jacob waits. In the darkness, with wine clouding his senses, and 7 years of longing overwhelming his caution, Jacob receives his bride. But when morning comes, and the first light of dawn illuminates the woman beside him, Jacob's world collapses. It is not Rachel. It is Leah, Rachel's older sister. Her eyes are weak, lacking the bright intelligence that drew Jacob to Rachel. Her face, while pleasant enough, is not the face that has haunted his dreams for 7 years. Jacob leaps from the bed, his mind reeling. "What is this you have done to me? Didn't I work for you for Rachel? Why have you deceived me?" Laban's response is calm, almost casual. "It is not the custom in our place to give the younger daughter in marriage before the firstborn. Complete the bridal week with this one, and we will give you the other one too for another 7 years of work." The trap is perfect in its simplicity. Jacob is already married to Leah. The marriage has been consummated. In the eyes of law and custom, she is his wife, regardless of the deception that brought them together. And if he wants Rachel, if he still wants the woman he has loved for 7 years, he must agree to another 7 years of labor. Jacob stares at his uncle, recognizing in Laban's calculating smile something familiar. This is how it feels to be deceived, to have your expectations overturned by someone who has planned every detail. This is what Isaac felt when he discovered that the son he blessed was not the son he intended to bless. The wheel has come full circle. Jacob the deceiver has been deceived. But Jacob's love for Rachel is stronger than his anger at Laban's deception. After a week of honoring his obligations to Leah, he agrees to the terms. Another 7 years of labor for the woman who has captured his heart completely. The second wedding is simpler, but no less meaningful to Jacob. When he finally takes Rachel as his wife, the joy is tempered by the complexity of his situation. 2 wives, 2 sisters, bound together in a household that will become a crucible of rivalry and blessing. The years that follow are marked by both prosperity and pain. Jacob's skill as a shepherd continues to multiply Laban's wealth. The flocks grow larger and healthier under his care. His reputation spreads throughout the region as a man blessed by divine favor. But within the family tent, tensions simmer like a pot ready to boil over. Leah, the unloved wife, bears children quickly. Reuben first. "The Lord has seen my misery. That's us," she declares. Then Simeon, "The Lord heard that I am unloved." Then Levi, "Now my husband will become attached to me." Finally Judah, "This time I will praise the Lord. 4 sons in rapid succession, each birth a cry from Leah's heart for the love her husband cannot give her. Rachel, meanwhile, remains barren. The beautiful wife, the beloved one, watches her sister's belly swell year after year while her own remains empty. The irony is bitter. She has Jacob's love, but not his children, while Leah has his children, but not his heart. The rivalry between the sisters escalates when Rachel, desperate for children, gives her servant Bilhah to Jacob as a wife. Through Bilhah, Rachel claims 2 sons, Dan and Naphtali. Not to be outdone, Leah gives her servant Zilpah to Jacob, gaining 2 more sons through her, Gad and Asher. The competition reaches its peak during the wheat harvest, when Reuben finds mandrakes in the field. These plants, believed to enhance fertility, become the center of a desperate negotiation between the sisters. "Give me some of your son's mandrakes," Rachel pleads with Leah. But Leah's response reveals the depth of her pain. "Isn't it enough that you've taken my husband? Now you want to take my son's mandrakes too?" Rachel, swallowing her pride, offers a trade that shows how far she will go for the hope of children. "He can sleep with you tonight in exchange for your son's mandrakes." That night, Leah conceives again, bearing Issachar and then Zebulun. Finally, she gives birth to a daughter, Dinah. Then at last, God remembers Rachel. She conceives and bears a son, naming him Joseph. "May the Lord give me another son." The long years of barrenness are ended, but the scars of rivalry run deep. Jacob now has 11 sons and 1 daughter. But more than that, he has learned hard lessons about the consequences of favoritism and deception. The pain he caused his brother Esau echoes in the pain he sees between Leah and Rachel. The manipulation he practiced in his father's house finds its mirror in Laban's treatment of him. After 20 years in Haran, Jacob begins to feel the pull of home. The promise Gullah made at Bethel haunts his dreams, the promise of return of the land that would belong to his descendants. But leaving will not be simple. Laban has grown wealthy through Jacob's labor and has no intention of letting his most valuable worker simply walk away. The negotiation that follows showcases all of Jacob's cunning and Laban's greed. "What should I give you?" Laban asks when Jacob expresses his desire to leave. Jacob's response is carefully calculated. "Don't give me anything. If you will do this one thing for me, I will continue to shepherd your flock. Let me go through all your sheep today, removing all the speckled and spotted sheep, and all the dark-colored lambs, and the spotted and speckled goats. They will be my wages." It seems like a modest request. The solid-colored animals are far more numerous than the spotted and speckled ones. Laban agrees quickly, perhaps too quickly, but Jacob has a plan that goes beyond simple animal husbandry. Using his understanding of animal breeding, knowledge that seems almost supernatural in its effectiveness, Jacob arranges conditions that favor the birth of speckled and spotted offspring. Some scholars suggest divine intervention. Others point to Jacob's practical wisdom about genetics and animal behavior. Whatever the mechanism, the result is undeniable. Jacob's flocks multiply rapidly, while Laban's remain relatively static. Within a few years, Jacob has become wealthy in his own right, with large flocks, many servants, and considerable household goods. Laban's sons begin to grumble. Jacob has taken all that was our father's, and from what was our father's he has gained all this wealth. The political situation becomes untenable. Jacob can see the change in Laban's attitude, the growing resentment that threatens to explode into open conflict. It is time to go, but it must be done carefully. The decision is made for him when God speaks directly. Return to the land of your fathers and to your family, and I will be with you. The divine command removes all doubt. Jacob calls Rachel and Leah to the field where his flocks graze away from listening ears and watching eyes. I can see that your father's attitude toward me has changed, but the God of my father has been with me. You know that I have served your father with all my strength, yet your father has deceived me and changed my wages 10 times. But God has not allowed him to harm me. The sister's response surprises him with its vehemence. Years of watching their father's manipulation have taken their toll. Don't we account for anything to our father? Hasn't he sold us and spent what was paid for us? All the wealth that God has taken away from our father belongs to us and our children, so do whatever God has told you. The escape is planned with military precision. While Laban is away shearing sheep, a 3-day journey from home, Jacob loads his wives, children, and possessions onto camels and sets out for Canaan. The timing gives them a significant head start before the deception is discovered. But Rachel adds an unexpected complication to their departure. Unbeknownst to Jacob, she steals her father's household gods, small idols that represent both religious devotion and legal claim to family inheritance. It is an act that will put the entire family at risk. 3 days later, Laban discovers their flight. His rage is immediate and terrible. Gathering his kinsmen, he sets out in pursuit, driving his camels hard across the desert terrain. The chase lasts 7 days. Laban's knowledge of the terrain and his determination to recover his daughters and wealth allow him to close the gap steadily. But on the night before he would catch up to Jacob's caravan, God speaks to Laban in a dream. Be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad. The warning is clear. Laban may confront Jacob, but he cannot harm him or force him to return. Divine protection surrounds the fleeing family. When Laban finally catches up to Jacob on the hill country of Gilead, his first words reveal his frustration and confusion. What have you done? You've deceived me and carried off my daughters like prisoners of war. Why did you secretly flee from me and deceive me? Why didn't you tell me so I could send you away with joy and singing to the music of tambourines and lyres? But beneath the hurt father's rhetoric lies a sharper accusation. Why did you steal my gods? Jacob's response is indignant and confident. He knows nothing of Rachel's theft, and his sense of moral authority allows him to speak boldly. I was afraid, for I thought that you would take your daughters from me by force. Anyone with whom you find your God shall not live. In the presence of our kinsmen, identify what I have that belongs to you and take it. The challenge is dangerous. Jacob has just pronounced a death sentence on whoever stole the gods, not knowing that his beloved Rachel is the guilty party. Laban searches thoroughly: Jacob's tent, Leah's tent, the tents of the female servants. Finally, he comes to Rachel's tent. But Rachel has hidden the household gods in her camel's saddle and is sitting in it. My lord, don't be angry that I cannot stand up before you, for I am having my monthly period. The excuse works perfectly. Ancient taboos about menstrual impurity prevent Laban from requiring her to move, and he does not think to search beneath her. The gods remain hidden, and Rachel's life is preserved. Having found nothing, Laban is forced to acknowledge defeat. But Jacob is not content to let the matter end quietly. 20 years of accumulated grievance pour out in a torrent of righteous anger. What is my crime? What is my sin that you have pursued me? You have searched all my goods. What have you found of all your household goods? Set it here before my kinsmen and your kinsmen, so that they may decide between us two. Jacob recounts the faithfulness of his service, the animals he protected, the losses he made good from his own flocks, the harsh conditions he endured. I served you 14 years for your 2 daughters and 6 years for your flock, and you have changed my wages 10 times. If the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac had not been on my side, surely now you would have sent me away empty-handed. The confrontation ends with a covenant between the 2 men. They gather stones and build a pillar, creating a physical boundary between their territories. Laban names it Jagar Sahadutha in Aramaic. Jacob calls it Galid in Hebrew. Both names mean heap of witness. This heap is a witness between you and me today. Laban declares, May the Lord watch between you and me when we are absent one from the other. It is both a blessing and a warning. The covenant establishes peace between them, but it also ensures that they will remain separated. Jacob will continue south to Canaan. Laban will return north to Haran. Their paths will not cross again. The next morning, Laban kisses his daughters and grandchildren goodbye. It is a bittersweet parting. A father releasing his children to a destiny he cannot share, knowing he will likely never see them again. Jacob continues his journey south, but now the weight of another confrontation presses on his mind. Somewhere ahead lies the land of his birth, and in that land lives his brother Esau, the man who swore to kill him, the brother whose blessing he stole, and whose rage drove him into 20 years of exile. The time of reckoning has come. Jacob sends messengers ahead to Esau in the land of Seir, crafting his words carefully to show respect and seek reconciliation. This is what you are to say to my lord Esau. Your servant Jacob says, I have been staying with Laban and have remained there till now. I have cattle and donkeys, sheep and goats, male and female servants. Now I am sending this message to my lord, that I may find favor in your eyes. The language is deliberately submissive. Jacob calls Esau my lord, and himself your servant, inverting the hierarchy established by Isaac's blessing. It is a gesture of humility, designed to diffuse 20 years of accumulated anger. But when the messengers return, their report sends ice through Jacob's veins. We went to your brother Esau, and now he is coming to meet you, and 400 men are with him. 400 men. It is not a family reunion. It is an army. The brother who threatened to kill Jacob is approaching with the force to make good on that threat. Terror grips Jacob's heart. All his wealth, all his children, everything he has gained in 20 years of labor could be destroyed in a single day of violence. The man who has always relied on cunning and negotiation finds himself facing a situation that cannot be manipulated away. Jacob's response shows both his practical wisdom and his growing faith. First, he divides his people and flocks into two camps, reasoning that if Esau attacks one, the other might escape. It is a precaution born of hard experience in a dangerous world. But then Jacob does something that marks a fundamental change in his character. He prays, not the conditional prayer of his youth at Bethel, but a mature appeal to divine faithfulness. O God of my father Abraham and God of my father Isaac, Lord, you who said to me, go back to your country and your relatives, and I will make you prosper. I am unworthy of all the kindness and faithfulness you have shown your servant. I had only my staff when I crossed this Jordan, but now I have become two camps. Save me, I pray, from the hand of my brother Esau, for I am afraid he will come and attack me, and also the mothers with their children. But you have said, I will surely make you prosper, and will make your descendants like the sand of the sea, which cannot be counted. It is a prayer that acknowledges both human fear and divine promise. Jacob admits his terror while claiming God's faithfulness. He confesses his unworthiness while appealing to covenant love. But faith does not eliminate the need for wisdom. After praying, Jacob prepares an elaborate gift for his brother, hundreds of goats and sheep, camels, and cattle, donkeys, and their foals. He arranges them in separate droves, each led by servants, with instructions to present them as gifts from your servant Jacob to my lord Esau. The gift serves multiple purposes. It demonstrates Jacob's prosperity and his respect for his brother. It may appease Esau's anger, or at least slow his approach, and if nothing else, it shows that Jacob is not returning as a beggar seeking charity, but as a successful man offering tribute. As night falls, Jacob makes the final preparations. He takes his wives, his female servants, and his 11 children across the ford of the Jabbok River. Then he sends across all his possessions, everything he has accumulated in 20 years of labor. And then Jacob is alone with his thoughts, his fears, his regrets, alone with the weight of decisions made and consequences faced, alone with the God who called him and the promises that seem so distant in this dark hour. The river runs black beside him, carrying the sound of his family settling into camp on the far side. Tomorrow will bring the confrontation he has dreaded for 20 years. Tomorrow he will face his brother and learn whether the anger of youth has hardened into the hatred of manhood. But tonight there is only the silence and the darkness, and the questions that have no easy answers. And then he is not alone. A figure emerges from the shadows, tall, powerful, with features obscured by darkness. Neither speaks. There is no need for words. This encounter has been building for 20 years, waiting for the moment when all of Jacob's cleverness and cunning would be stripped away, leaving only the essential question, who is Jacob really? The wrestling begins without warning. Not the playful grappling of boys, but the desperate struggle of men whose very identity is at stake. They fight in silence, except for the sound of breathing and the scuff of feet on rocky ground. Hour after hour, the battle continues. Neither gains a decisive advantage. Jacob discovers that his opponent possesses strength beyond human limits, but somehow Jacob's own strength seems enhanced, allowing him to match move for move, hold for hold. This is not merely physical combat. It is a spiritual struggle that encompasses all of Jacob's life. His rivalry with Esau, his deception of Isaac, his years of labor for Laban, his complex relationships with his wives, his fear of the coming confrontation. Everything he has been and done is caught up in this midnight wrestling match beside the Jabbok. As the eastern sky begins to show the first hint of dawn, the stranger changes tactics. With a touch that seems almost casual, he strikes Jacob's hip socket. The joint dislocates with an audible pop, sending lightning bolts of pain through Jacob's body. But Jacob does not release his hold, cannot release it. This stranger carries something Jacob needs more than life itself, a blessing that cannot be stolen or manipulated, only received as a gift. "Let me go," the stranger says, "for the day is breaking." Jacob's response comes from the deepest places of his heart. "I will not let you go unless you bless me." 20 years ago, Jacob stole a blessing through deception and drove his family apart. Tonight, he will receive a blessing through honest confession and desperate faith. "What is your name?" The question pierces Jacob like a sword. His name is his identity, his history, his shame. Jacob. Chka, the grasper, the supplanter, the one who takes what belongs to others. To speak, it is to acknowledge everything he has been. Jacob. The admission hangs in the pre-dawn air like a prayer or a confession. And the stranger's response transforms everything. No longer will your name be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with humans and have overcome. Israel, the one who wrestles with God, not the grasper or the supplanter, but the one who engages with the divine in honest struggle and emerges blessed, the limping prince who will father a nation. Jacob's question comes as a whisper. "Please tell me your name." But the stranger's identity remains mysterious. "Why do you ask my name?" Instead of an answer, there is a blessing. The stranger places his hands on Jacob's head and speaks words that will echo through generations. "Blessed be Jacob, who has become Israel." As the first rays of sunlight break across the eastern hills, the stranger is gone. Jacob stands alone beside the river, his hip joint screaming with pain, his whole body aching from the night's struggle. But he is no longer the same man who crossed this river 20 years ago as a frightened exile. He has a new name, a new identity, a new relationship with the God of his fathers. Jacob names the place Peniel, the face of God. Because I have seen God face to face, and my life has been preserved. The sun rises as Jacob limps across the Jabbok to rejoin his family. The limp will stay with him for the rest of his life, a permanent reminder of the night he wrestled with God and received a blessing that could not be stolen. But as he approaches his camp, Jacob sees something that makes his transformed heart leap with hope. In the distance, a cloud of dust signals the approach of riders. At their head rides a familiar figure, old and weather-beaten, but unmistakably Esau. Jacob's brother is coming. The confrontation he has dreaded for 20 years is at hand. But Jacob is no longer the man who fled in terror from his father's tents. He is Israel now, the one who wrestles with God and emerges blessed. The transformation shows immediately in Jacob's approach to the coming encounter. Instead of hiding behind his servants and gifts, he moves to the front of his family group. Instead of sending more messengers or attempting further manipulation, he walks directly toward his brother. As Esau draws closer, Jacob can see that he is indeed accompanied by 400 men. But something in his brother's posture, something in the way he reads, suggests that this is not the attack Jacob had feared. When they are close enough to see each other clearly, Jacob does something that would have been impossible for the old Jacob. He bows down to the ground 7 times as he approaches his brother. It is a gesture of complete submission, the acknowledgement that he seeks reconciliation rather than dominance. And then Esau does something that no one could have predicted. He runs toward Jacob, not with sword drawn or spear raised, but with arms open wide. When he reaches his brother, Esau throws his arms around Jacob's neck and kisses him. Both brothers weep. 20 years of anger, 20 years of separation, 20 years of wondering and fearing, all of it dissolves in a moment of grace that neither man expected. The reconciliation that seemed impossible has happened as naturally as sunrise. "Who are these with you?" Esau asks, looking at the women and children gathered behind Jacob. "The children God has graciously given your servant," Jacob replies, still using the deferential language that acknowledges Esau's position as the elder brother. Jacob presents his family to Esau, first the servants and their children, then Leah and her children, finally Rachel and Joseph. Each group bows respectfully to Esau, who receives them with warmth and curiosity. "What do you mean by all this company that I met?" Esau asks, referring to the elaborate gifts Jacob had sent ahead. "To find favor in the sight of my Lord," Jacob answers. But Esau's response reveals how much both brothers have changed. "I have enough, my brother. Keep what you have for yourself." The offer to return the gifts shows that Esau's motivations are not mercenary. He has not come seeking compensation or tribute. He has come because 20 years have taught him that blood is thicker than old grievances. But Jacob insists that Esau accept the gifts. "Please, if I have found favor in your sight, then accept my present from my hand, for I have seen your face, which is like seeing the face of God, and you have accepted me." The comparison is striking. Jacob has just seen the face of God at Peniel wrestling through the night for a blessing. Now he sees that same divine grace reflected in his brother's forgiveness. The face of God appears not only in supernatural encounters, but in the mercy of human relationships restored. Esau proposes that they travel together, but Jacob gently declines. His flocks and young children cannot move at the pace of mounted warriors. "Let my Lord pass on ahead of his servant, and I will lead on slowly at the pace of the livestock that are ahead of me, and at the pace of the children, until I come to my Lord in Seir." It is a diplomatic way of saying that their paths must remain separate. The reconciliation is real, but it does not erase the complexity of their situations. Esau has built his life in Seir. Jacob's destiny lies in Canaan, so offers to leave some of his men as protection for Jacob's caravan. But again, Jacob politely declined. "What need is there? Let me find favor in the sight of my Lord." The brothers part peacefully, but they part nonetheless. Esau returns to Seir, while Jacob continues his journey toward Canaan. The confrontation that could have ended in bloodshed has become a moment of grace that heals old wounds without creating new complications. But Jacob's journey is far from over. Entering the promised land brings new challenges and new failures. At Shechem, his daughter Dinah is violated by the prince of the city, leading to a cycle of revenge that ends with his sons, Simeon and Levi, massacring the entire male population of the town. The violence appalls Jacob not only for its brutality, but for its treachery. His sons use the covenant sign of circumcision as a trap promising peace while planning war. It is deception on a scale that makes Jacob's own past manipulations seem minor by comparison. "You have brought trouble on me," Jacob tells Simeon and Levi, "by making me stink to the inhabitants of the land." But their response shows how little they understand the true nature of honor. Should he treat our sister like a prostitute? The incident at Shechem forces Jacob to confront the reality that his sons have inherited not only his blessing, but also his capacity for deception and violence. The patterns of favoritism and rivalry that marked his own relationship with Esau are already emerging in the next generation. It is time to return to Bethel. God's command comes at exactly the right moment. Arise, go up to Bethel, and dwell there. Make an altar there to the God who appeared to you when you fled from your brother Esau. The return to Bethel is more than a geographical journey. It is a spiritual pilgrimage back to the place where Jacob first encountered the living God. Before they can make this journey, however, Jacob demands that his household purify itself. "Put away the foreign gods that are among you, and purify yourselves, and change your garments. Then let us arise, and go up to Bethel, so that I may make there an altar to the God who answers me in the day of my distress, and has been with me wherever I have gone." The household gods that Rachel stole from her father, the Canaanite idols, picked up during their stay at Shechem, the amulets and charms that represent the syncretic religion of the ancient Near East. All of it must be abandoned. This journey requires absolute commitment to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They bury the foreign gods under an oak tree near Shechem, along with the earrings that often carried religious significance. It is a symbolic burial of the old life, the old loyalties, the old attempts to hedge their bets with multiple deities. The journey to Bethel is protected by divine terror that falls on the surrounding cities. Despite the massacre at Shechem, despite the fear and anger it has generated, no one pursues or attacks Jacob's caravan. The same God who protected him from Laban and reconciled him with Esau now shields him from the consequences of his son's violence. At Bethel, Jacob builds the altar he promised and calls the place El Bethel, the God of Bethel. It is here that God appears to him again, confirming the new name and the ancient promises. Your name is Jacob. No longer shall your name be called Jacob, but Israel shall be your name. I am God Almighty. Be fruitful and multiply. A nation and a company of nations shall come from you, and kings shall come from your own body. The land that I gave to Abraham and Isaac, I will give to you, and I will give the land to your descendants after you. The promises given to Abraham are confirmed to the third generation. The land of Canaan will belong to Jacob's descendants. From his 12 sons will come the 12 tribes of Israel. Kings will arise from his lineage, including the greatest king of all. But even this moment of divine confirmation is shadowed by human sorrow. As they journey from Bethel toward Ephrath, Rachel goes into labor with her second child. The birth is difficult, more difficult than any of the previous births in Jacob's household. As her strength fails, the midwife tries to encourage her. "Do not fear, for you have another son." With her dying breath, Rachel names the child Ben-Oni, son of my sorrow. But Jacob, unwilling to let his beloved wife's pain define his son's identity, renames the boy Benjamin, son of my right hand. Rachel dies and is buried on the way to Ephrath, which is Bethlehem. Jacob sets up a pillar over her grave, a monument to the woman who captured his heart at a well in Haran and held it for the rest of her life. The loss of Rachel marks the end of an era for Jacob. The great love of his life is gone, leaving him with 12 sons and 1 daughter, but without the companion who shared his dreams and his struggles. And there is more sorrow to come. Jacob's eldest son, Reuben, perhaps seeking to assert his position as firstborn, or perhaps simply acting on impulse, sleeps with Bilhah, his father's concubine, and the mother of Dan and Naphtali. The act is both personal betrayal and political calculation. In the ancient world, claiming a ruler's concubine was often a way of asserting claim to his authority. But for Jacob, it is simply one more reminder that the patterns of rivalry and moral failure that marked his own generation are being repeated in his sons. Jacob hears of Reuben's action but says nothing at the time. The confrontation will come later on his deathbed, when he delivers his final judgments on his sons. The family settles near Hebron, where Isaac still lives. The reunion between father and daughter, after 20 years of separation, is not recorded in detail, but we can imagine the mixture of joy and sorrow it must have brought. Isaac sees his son transformed, blessed with wives and children and wealth, but also marked by struggle and loss. Isaac lives to see his grandsons and to know that the promises of God will continue through Jacob's line. When he dies at the age of 180, both his sons unite to bury him in the cave of Machpelah beside Abraham and Sarah. The burial of Isaac marks Jacob's full assumption of his role as patriarch. No longer is he the younger son seeking his father's blessing. He is now the head of the covenant family, responsible for passing on the promises of God to the next generation. But it is in this role that Jacob makes his greatest mistake. Among his 12 sons, Jacob loves Joseph most of all. Born to Rachel in her maturity, beautiful and intelligent, gifted with dreams and interpretations, Joseph becomes the focus of all Jacob's hopes and affections. The favoritism is blatant and destructive. Jacob makes Joseph a richly ornamented robe that marks him as the favored son. He keeps Joseph at home while sending his brothers to distant pastures with the flocks. He listens to Joseph's reports about his brother's misconduct and believes Joseph's prophetic dreams about his future dominance over the family. The pattern is exactly what destroyed Jacob's own family. Isaac's favoritism toward Esau and Rebekah's favoritism toward Jacob created the rivalry and deception that drove Jacob into exile. Now Jacob is repeating the same mistake with his own children. Joseph's brothers hate him because of their father's favoritism, When Joseph tells them his dreams, sheaves of grain bowing down to his sheaf son, and moon and stars bowing down to him, their hatred turns murderous. The opportunity comes when Jacob sends Joseph to check on his brothers who are pasturing the flocks near Dothan. When they see him approaching in his distinctive robe, they plot his death. "Here comes this dreamer," they say to one another. "Come now, let us kill him and throw him into one of the pits. Then we will say that a fierce animal has devoured him. We shall see what will become of his dreams." Only Reuben's intervention saves Joseph's life, and even then barely. Instead of killing him outright, they throw him into an empty cistern, planning to leave him to die of thirst and exposure. But when a caravan of Ishmaelite traders passes by on their way to Egypt, Judah suggests a different solution. "What profit is it if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother, our own flesh." They sell Joseph for 20 shekels of silver, the price of a slave. Then they take his sword, tear it, and dip it in the blood of a goat they have killed. When they return to their father, they present the bloodied robe as evidence of Joseph's death. "This we have found. Please identify whether it is your son's robe or not." And Jacob's grief is immediate and overwhelming. "It is my son's robe. A fierce animal has devoured him." Joseph is without doubt torn to pieces. For days, Jacob mourns, refusing all comfort. His sons and daughters try to console him, but their words ring hollow because they know the truth. Joseph is not dead, but enslaved, sold by his own brothers into a life of bondage in a foreign land. The irony is bitter. Jacob, who deceived his own father with a goat and a false identity, is now deceived by his sons, using the same methods. The man who manipulated circumstances to steal his brother's blessing now suffers as his own family is torn apart by jealousy and deception. But God's purposes are not thwarted by human sin. Even as Jacob mourns his lost son, that son is beginning a journey that will ultimately save the entire family from famine and lead to the fulfillment of ancient promises in ways no one could have imagined. The years that follow are marked by sorrow and loss for Jacob. He carries the grief of Joseph's supposed death like a wound that will not heal. The bright promise of his youth seems to have devolved into the ordinary tragedies of a broken world. But he continues to live to lead his family to maintain the covenant relationship with God that defines his identity. He teaches his remaining sons about the God of Abraham and Isaac. He tells them the stories of divine encounters and miraculous provision. He passes on the promises that he himself received at Bethel and renewed at Peniel. When famine comes to Canaan, a severe, prolonged drought that threatens the lives of people and animals throughout the region, Jacob faces the hardest decision of his later years. There is grain in Egypt, but Egypt is far away and full of dangers. More than that, Egypt represents everything that could pull his family away from the promises of God. Abraham had gone down to Egypt during a famine and nearly lost his wife to Pharaoh's household. Isaac had been specifically commanded not to go to Egypt, but to remain in the promised land. How can Jacob abandon Canaan for the sake of temporary relief? But the famine is severe, and his family is starving. When he hears that there is grain for sale in Egypt, Jacob makes the decision that will change everything. Go down and buy grain for us there that we may live and not die. He sends 10 of his sons to Egypt, but he keeps Benjamin at home. Benjamin is Rachel's other son, the only remaining link to the great love of Jacob's life. He cannot bear the thought of losing Benjamin as he lost Joseph. What Jacob does not know is that he is sending his sons into the presence of the brother they betrayed. Joseph has become the second most powerful man in Egypt, the administrator who manages the kingdom's response to the famine. When Jacob's sons arrive, seeking grain, they bow down before Joseph exactly as his childhood dreams had predicted. The confrontation that follows will test every lesson Jacob's family has learned about forgiveness, reconciliation, and the mysterious ways in which God works through human failures to accomplish divine purposes. But that is Joseph's story, and it deserves its own telling. As for Jacob, he waits in Canaan, not knowing that his supposedly dead son holds the power of life and death over his other children. He does not know that the grief he has carried for 20 years is based on a lie. He does not know that God is weaving the threads of his family's betrayal and brokenness into a tapestry of redemption that will span generations. All he knows is that he is an old man who has wrestled with God and men and has prevailed. He carries a new name that speaks of divine encounter and covenant blessing. He limps when he walks, a permanent reminder of the night he would not let go until he received what God had for him. The promises given to Abraham have been passed down through Isaac to Jacob, and they will continue through Jacob's 12 sons. The land of Canaan lies around him, still largely unpossessed, but guaranteed by divine oath. The descendants, who will one day number like the stars of heaven, are beginning to multiply in his household. Jacob's life is not yet finished. There will be a reunion with Joseph that will bring tears of joy after decades of sorrow. There will be a journey to Egypt that will preserve his family through the remaining years of famine. There will be a final gathering of his sons around his deathbed, where he will speak prophetic words over each of them that will shape the destiny of the tribes of Israel. When that moment comes, Jacob will remember the night by the Jabbok River when everything changed. He will remember the wrestling match that gave him a new name and a new identity. He will remember the blessing that could not be stolen, but only received through honest struggle with the living God. The man who began life grasping his brother's heel will end it surrounded by children and grandchildren who carry within them the genetic and spiritual inheritance of Abraham's covenant. The promises that seemed so distant during those long nights in Laban's fields will be visibly taking shape in the next generation. But perhaps most importantly, Jacob will die knowing that his story is not really about him at all. It is about the God who chooses the unlikely, who works through human failure and frailty, who transforms graspers into wrestlers and supplanters into patriarchs. The God who appeared to him at Bethel as a young exile will appear to him again as an old man preparing to die. The promises will be renewed one final time, not because Jacob has earned them, but because God is faithful to his word. As Jacob breathes his last in the land of Egypt, far from the promised land but surrounded by the promised descendants, he will know that his wrestling match by the Jabbok was the defining moment of his life. Not because he won, though in some sense he did, but because he learned what it means to encounter the living God and be forever changed by that encounter. The transformation from Jacob to Israel is complete. The heel grasper has become the father of nations. The deceiver has become the bearer of divine promises. The exile has become the patriarch whose name will be invoked by believers for thousands of years to come. His 12 sons will become the 12 tribes of Israel. His descendants will inherit the land of Canaan and establish a kingdom that will endure for centuries. From his lineage will come priests and prophets, kings and warriors, poets and sages. One day, the ultimate fulfillment of all the promises will appear in the form of a descendant of Judah born in Bethlehem, where Rachel was buried, who will be called the Prince of Peace. But all of that is still in the future, as Jacob wrestles through the dark night of his soul beside the Jabbok River. In this moment, there is only the struggle, the pain, the desperate refusal to let go without receiving what God has for him. The dawn is breaking now. The eastern sky shows the first pale light of a new day. The mysterious wrestler touches Jacob's hip, and the joint dislocates with a sound like breaking wood. Lightning bolts of pain shoot through Jacob's body, but still he holds on. Let me go, for the day is breaking. But Jacob's grip tightens instead of loosening. 20 years of running, 20 years of wrestling with consequences and complications, 20 years of seeking a blessing that seemed always just out of reach. All of it comes down to this moment. I will not let you go unless you bless me. The words echo across the water and into history. They become the cry of every person who has ever struggled with God, who has ever demanded more than religion or tradition or second-hand faith can provide. They become the prayer of everyone who has ever wanted to encounter the living God directly, personally, transformatively. What is your name? The question requires the most honest answer Jacob has ever given. His name is his identity, his history, his shame, and his calling all wrapped together. To speak it is to acknowledge everything he has been and everything he hopes to become. Jacob. And with that confession, everything changes. The deceiver becomes the wrestler, the supplanter becomes the patriarch, the exile becomes the father of nations. No longer will your name be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with humans and have overcome. Israel. The name will echo through history. It will become the identity of a people, the name of a nation, the symbol of humanity's relationship with the divine. It will represent not perfection, but persistence, not sinlessness, but struggle, not easy answers, but honest wrestling with the deepest questions of existence. Jacob limps away from the Jabbok as the sun rises, but he limps as Israel. The man who crossed this river 20 years ago as a frightened exile now crosses back as a blessed patriarch. The transformation is complete, and it will endure forever. His descendants will carry this story forward from generation to generation. They will tell it around campfires in the wilderness, in the temple courts of Jerusalem, in synagogues scattered across the world. They will find in Jacob's struggle their own story, their own identity, their own calling to wrestle with God and emerge blessed. And today, thousands of years later, the story continues. in every person who refuses to accept easy answers to life's hardest questions, in everyone who demands more than superficial religion can provide, in all who are willing to wrestle through the dark night of the soul, rather than walk away from the struggle. Jacob's legacy is not perfection, but transformation. Not sinlessness, but forgiveness. Not easy victory, but hard-won blessing that comes only to those who refuse to let go until they receive what God has for them. The man who grasped his brother's heel in the womb became the father who grasped the hem of heaven until it blessed him. The supplanter became the wrestler. The deceiver became the truth-teller who could look God in the face and speak his name honestly. This is what it means to be Israel, to wrestle with God and prevail, not through strength or cunning or manipulation, but through the stubborn refusal to give up on the promise of divine blessing, through the willingness to limp through life rather than walk away unchanged. Jacob's story ends where it began, with a blessing. But this blessing cannot be stolen or manipulated. It can only be received by those who are willing to struggle through the darkness until the dawn breaks and the light reveals who they really are. The river flows on beside the place where heaven touched earth, and a man received a new name. The dawn gives way to full daylight, and the ordinary world resumes its ordinary business. But something has changed forever in the spiritual landscape of human experience. God has a new name, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And humanity has a new possibility, the chance to wrestle with the divine and emerge blessed, transformed, and forever changed. The sun is fully risen now. Jacob, Israel, gathers his strength and begins the journey toward his family, toward his brother, toward the future that God has prepared for him. He walks with a limp that will never fully heal, but he walks as a man who has seen God face to face and lived to tell about it. Behind him, the place called Peniel waits quietly for the next struggler, the next seeker, the next person brave enough to wrestle with God until the blessing comes. The river runs on carrying its ancient secret toward the sea, and the story continues one wrestler at a time, one blessing at a time, one transformation at a time. This is the gospel according to Jacob. God meets us in our brokenness, wrestles with us in our darkness, and blesses us in our honesty. He takes heel graspers and makes them patriarchs. He takes deceivers and makes them truth tellers. He takes exiles and makes them fathers of nations. All it requires is the willingness to hold on until the blessing comes, to wrestle through the night until the dawn breaks, to refuse to let go until we receive the new name, the new identity, the new possibility that God has waiting for everyone brave enough to struggle with him. The man called Jacob walked into the darkness beside the Jabbok River, carrying 20 years of mistakes, failures, and broken relationships. The man called Israel walked out of that darkness, carrying the blessing of God and the promise of generations yet to come. The difference between them was one night of wrestling, one encounter with the divine that changed everything, one moment of honest struggle that transformed a lifetime of grasping into a legacy of blessing. This is Jacob's story. This is Israel's beginning. This is the invitation that echoes across the centuries to everyone who hears it. Come and wrestle with God. Come and receive your new name. Come and discover what it means to struggle with the divine and emerge forever changed. The sun rises on a new day, and the wrestling match is finished. But the blessing continues, passed down from generation to generation, from father to son, from story to story until the end of time. In the beginning was the struggle. In the end is the blessing. And in between is the transformation that comes to everyone willing to hold on until the dawn breaks and the light reveals who they really are. This is the way of Jacob. This is the path of Israel. This is the invitation that waits for all who are brave enough to wrestle with God until He blesses them.